All right. Thank you, brothers and sisters. David G., grateful recovering alcoholic and grateful recovering lustaholic. I'm grateful to have a recovery date in both programs. AA of August of 1994 and SA of October 1st, 2019. We've been gone for a little while, so it's good to be back. It's good to see all you guys, and thank you for coming out. We've been doing this for a lot of weeks, and we took some time off during the holidays, during Christmas and the New Year's. During that time, I got to celebrate 16 years of marriage anniversary. Very, very blessed to have been able to do that. I promise you. That's something that should have been gone. And my fear is that it always would. The good news is God is bigger than any of that. He's bigger than me. He's bigger than all of it. Tradition 2, which we'll be talking about some later on. There's but one ultimate authority. It's not me and it's not her. It's a loving God, as he may represent himself here. And so very grateful to be back. We've carefully covered the first 6 chapters of the book. We've combed through that pretty good. And as Dennis said, the recordings for those are available. And we looked in depth at what the problem was, what the solution was, and what the action steps necessary to stay in that solution was. And having had that experience, it has been my experience, and I'm sure many of yours, because I know there's a lot of people on this call that have been through this book and had this experience. We know that there's just something about this that gives us the inspiration and the want to pass this on to somebody else once we've had this experience. One of the things that they used to say, you know, in order to keep it, you must give it away. And never had been in the book at that point, just sitting around the fellowship and hearing those words spoken. I always thought to myself, if I ever get this, the last thing I'm going to do is ever give it away to anybody. I'm going to grab a hold of it, I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to run. Of course, you know, that's not our experience here. You know, once we're lifted to higher ground, I think it's our obligation to try to bring our brother there with us as long as he's willing to come. And that's one of the notes that I do have in my book. In order to lift one up, you must be on higher ground yourself. Now, a lot of people that I've met over the years, they sit in meetings, they learn the lingo, they learn how to talk, and they're all too happy to help somebody out. And I think that's a good thing. I really do. But the book says, obviously, you cannot transmit something that you haven't got. The 12th step, and we're going to be looking at that in depth today. If you hold your place there on 89, you'll go back over to 60. It says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message, not a message, not my message, this message as outlined in the first 6 chapters to alcoholics or sexaholics, and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. We looked at step 10 very in depth. We looked at step 11, the nightly review, the morning meditation. We looked very closely at how to practice the principles in all of our affairs. We finished that chapter up, and now we're working with others. There was a joke, and I told it a little while back. It was, you know, the Messiah had came into town. He was riding on a donkey, and man, there was a whole parade of people out there to see him. They were just happy to see the Messiah. They had big palm leaves. They were fanning him. They were just loving on him. And it, you know, and all the while, this donkey thought all of this was for him instead of the Messiah. So you and I are kind of like that donkey. If we're not very careful, carrying the message becomes more about me than it does about a loving God and about the instructions outlined in this book. I start thinking more about me and what I can get and what I will do and what's this and what's that. And I end up becoming the donkey. So I don't want to do that here. I want to remain humble. And my prayer every time before I sit down to do one of these, whenever I used to do them in person before COVID and all that came along, one of my big prayers always was, God, please let there be no ego and let there be no fear that can block your message here today. So that's my prayer. And I hope that by uncovering this the way we're going to look at it over the next few weeks, it will give you a better understanding of working with others. I know it definitely has me. And we're going to start right here on page 89. And we're going to bounce back and forth quite a bit in the book, looking at how the book connects to these things that we're talking about. And so we'll be doing that quite a bit. Chapter 7, working with others. Practical experience shows that nothing so much will ensure immunity from drinking, or in a lot of our cases, acting out, as intensive work with other alcoholics or sexaholics. Talking about this intensive work, works when other activities fail. I don't know about you, but there have been times in my sobriety when I've got up in the morning, I've prayed, and I still didn't quite feel right on the inside. I went to a meeting that day. I still didn't quite feel right on the inside. It wasn't until I reached out and I tried to help somebody else that came together. Now, if you remember over in the forward to the 3rd edition, and if you'll hold your place right there, let's take a run over there just for a second. And we'll take a look at that. And I think that's on Roman numeral 22. I want to keep good track of my Roman numerals today. I've gotten off a time or two here. But in the forward to the 3rd edition, and this is in a 4th edition book, let's take a look at that very last paragraph. In spite of the great increase in the size and the span of this fellowship, at its core, it remains simple and personal. Each day, somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks with another, sharing experience, strength, and hope. Not the day I went to the meeting. That helped. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. Not the day I prayed. Each day, recovery begins, and there's my key word, when one alcoholic talks with another, sharing experience, strength, and hope. So if you're having trouble in those areas, you're doing all those other things, and nothing seems to be working, try that. Reach out to someone, ask them how they're doing. Sit back and be willing to listen. My sponsor told me at that point, you don't need to talk anymore. It's up to them. And what a difference that has made in my sobriety. Wow. Beautiful. So the book says back over on page 89, this is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message. And we want to remember again, this message, not a message, not my message, this message of recovery to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. I have a lot of pastors in my life today that are my friends. They used to be, I felt, was my enemies. Today, they're my friends. Them, psychiatrists, psychologists, all kinds of different people send people to me to help on both sides of the road with recovery. And I've definitely been able to reach out and help. And so can you when no one else can, because we're the ones who have walked this road. We are the ones who have been in these shoes. So we know what it's like. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill, even in the program, even in the fellowship. I needed to make a note of that. I needed to put that note above that sentence. Remember, they are very ill, even in the program, because a lot of us come in, will be inspired by misrepresented information, and it's all good for a little while, but at some point that starts wearing off, and I can't figure out why. I'm going to as many meetings as they told me to. I'm praying the way they told me to. I've done the things that they've asked me to do, and for some reason I'm still crazier than hell, and I can't understand why. But the truth to be known is I had never cracked open the book with a sponsor and walked through the book as in the steps as they're outlined in the book. So even today, at times, I will find myself getting a little irritated with somebody that's in the program that can't seem to get it, that can't seem to this, can't seem to that. I always want to remember, always, like myself, they're very ill. And so look at this promise. Life will take on new meaning. Even if you come here and you don't do very much of the work, life will take on new meaning for us. And that's a promise. If we remember, it talked about, let's flip back if you'll hold there just for a second. And like I said, we'll jump around some, so I hope you don't mind, but let's go back to Roman numeral 20. And relating to what we just talked about, it's going to say this at the top of the page. These periods were being ironed out. Public acceptance of AA grew by leaps and bounds. For these, there were two principal reasons. Here's the first one. Large numbers of recoveries and reunited homes. Why would we not want that to be one of the first principal reasons? My God, that's what we're looking for when we come here and we get ourselves straightened out. These made their impressions everywhere of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried. 50% of them got sober at once and remained that way. 50%, my God. 25% sobered up after some relapses. But here's what connects to what we were reading back over there. Among the remainder, those who stayed on with AA or SA showed improvement. So that's about a 75% rate. And the reason that was is because the program and the fellowship were exactly the same. Today, it's not quite that way. But you can see just by looking at this part of the book, how beautiful that is. So the book says to watch people recover. And there's some guys on this call with me today that I sponsor. I'm seeing that in their life today. They're starting to sponsor other men. They're starting to bring this message to them today. They're starting to walk these men through the book. And man, it's been a beautiful process to see. It brings joy to my heart. It really, really does. To watch people recover, to see them help others. See, not just to hear about it, but to see it. To watch loneliness vanish. To see a fellowship grow up about you. I've seen that in both programs now. I'm beginning to see that fellowship grow up about me. To have a host of friends, some of the best friends in my life are right here in Sexaholics Anonymous today. I tell you, even more so than in the other fellowship. And I love everybody. I love both programs. But I can tell you that the non-judgment that I found over here on this side is something I'll cherish for all of my life. It's a fellowship and a host of friends that I thank God I didn't miss. Look at this sentence. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. So as we talked about in the beginning, once you've had a taste of this message, you're going to most definitely want to carry it on to someone else. Here's something that I took for granted for a long time, this sentence here. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. For a lot of years, the biggest reason that I went to a meeting was for me. Of course, if I'm not okay, they're not okay, and nobody is okay. But it's telling me here that really newcomers is the reason that we even go to meetings, or we should be. And it talks about this in another place in the book, but it says, frequent contact with newcomers, that's going to definitely be the bright spot of our life. So perhaps you're not acquainted with any drinkers or any lusters who want to recover, even in the fellowship. It says you can easily find some by asking a few doctors, ministers, priests, or hospitals. They'll only be too glad to assist you. Here's a direction. Don't start out as an evangelist or a reformer. And I don't know about you, but I know about me. And a lot of times I've done that. I want to go out and just tell this message, just tell about it, and how wonderful it was. And if you'll do this, this will happen and that. No, my job today is to lead a man through the steps, and where that goes with him and loving God, that's between them, not me. I am the guide, nothing. I am the donkey, nothing more. So, unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists, old ideas. The bad thing about that is I wake up with a brand new set of old ideas every day. It seems like every day I wake up with a brand new set of old ideas. It says you will be handicapped, and there's a promise, if you arouse it. Ministers and doctors are competent, and you can learn much from them if you wish. But it happens because of your own drinking and your own sexual acting out experience that you can be uniquely helpful. Man, what a promise. Remember page 77. Let's flip over there just a second. Hold on to that. And I was talking with my friend Jason, who's on the call today. And man, he brought out some things with this that I had never looked at as well. It talked about prejudice in those people. It says at the moment we're trying to put our life into order, not theirs, but ours. It says this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. And we talked about the word fit a lot. My job is to fit myself. The mission is God's. I'm fitting myself to prepare for that mission, no matter what that mission may be. I don't have the outcome of that mission. I need to fit myself. Well, when I get over here, I get a pretty good idea on page 89 what this mission is going to be. I am going to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all of my affairs. So back to page 89, if you would. So cooperate, never criticize. To be helpful is our only aim. When you discover a prospect for Alcoholics Anonymous or Sexaholics Anonymous, find out all you can about him. You can ask the men who are on this call today. There's a series of questions that I sit down and ask, and it's not because I'm trying to interrogate anybody or any of that. Whenever I start to sponsor them, I want to find out all I can about him. If he doesn't want to stop lusting, if he doesn't want to stop acting out, if he doesn't want to stop drinking, right here is a direction that I have definitely come to live by. Don't waste time trying to persuade him. For a long time, I would do that. I would try to talk him into it. I would, hey, man, are you sure? Are you absolutely sure this isn't what you want to do? Today it's, hey, brother, I'm going to pray for you. If I can help you, call me back. A friend of mine that's on this call today. We had a conversation by phone just a few minutes before this meeting started, and he was having some trouble with a family member. And there it is. There's the answer to it right there. If he does not want to stop, don't waste time trying to persuade him. And the reason why is right here. You may spoil a later opportunity to help him out. And, I've found that to be true in my experience. So this advice is given for his family also. They should be patient in realizing that they are dealing with a sick person. And, it's sometimes a little different in SA than it is in AA. I know with my wife, she understood that she was dealing with a sick person, but she didn't understand to what extent. I think that she just thought that I was just out, for selfish reasons, and I was just out to hurt a lot of people. And that might have been true to some extent, but I'm a lustaholic. I'm addicted. No matter how great the wish, I know today that I'm a sick person. And if I am, then so are they. And that's what I'm dealing with. If there is any indication that he wants to stop, have a good talk with the person most interested in him, usually his wife. Now, for most of us guys in the program over here in SA, that's probably not a real good idea. Let's let somebody else do that. I know some sisters on this call today, and I know some sisters around the world in SA, and I'm going to have one of them give her a call. How about that? So for me, that's it's not a good idea. Not today, even that I think that I would get out of sorts in any way. I don't want to take that chance. You know what? I'm still a human being. So here's the deal. Let's get an idea of his behavior. Yeah. Let's take a look at that, because that's going to tell us more than anything. His problems, his background. I share a lot with the guys about this stuff before we ever agree to sponsorship. The seriousness of his conditions. I always ask them this question right here. What is your faith tradition? And it's not because I want to try to change that in any way whatsoever. The only reason that I ask all these questions is for this one reason, and it's going to be laid out in this next couple of sentences. I need this information to put myself in his place, to see how I would like him to approach me if the tables were turned around. And that's the only reason that I go through that series of questions whenever I sit down to talk with somebody prior to sponsorship. Well, sometimes it's wise to wait till he goes on a binge, but sometimes it's not, So the book's going to give us a good suggestion here. It says the family may object to this, but unless he's in a dangerous physical condition, it's better to risk it. Don't deal with him when he's very drunk. Don't deal with him when he's very insane from his acting out, when he's so full of fear and so full of shame, and he's just crazy in the mind. I can remember being like that. And if anybody would have tried to approach me on that day, it would have been a very serious deal. So, there's times that I'm not going to deal with people until that has passed by. It says, unless he is ugly and the family needs your help, wait for the end of the spree, or at least the lucid interval. Then let his family or a friend ask him if he wants to quit for good, and if he would go to any extreme to do so. And so I think that that's the main question right there. And it all boils down to that. Do you want to stop? And are you willing to go to any extreme to do so? And over and over and over, this book is going to talk to us about this. If he says yes, then his attention should be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. There should be a question mark there. Am I that person? Have I done this work through these first 6 chapters? Have I had this experience that the book talks about on page 27? It talks about it on page 25 as well. In fact, let's go over and take a look at that. Hold your place right there. If you would run with me back over here to page 27 for just a second. Let's take a look at what the spiritual experience should look like in your and my life today. Have we worked through these first 6 chapters, and we're up there now beginning to work with others. Let's start right there in the middle of the page. This was a guy named Roland Hazard. He was talking to a man named Carl Jung. Carl had worked with him for a solid year. Roland was on his way home. He got to France and he ended up drunk again. He thought that could never happen to him again. He come back all beaten down and humbled like many of us do. And he asked the doctor, is there no exception? The doctor, yes, replied the doctor, there are exceptions as cases such as yours has been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics or sexaholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. And for us, these things are vital. To me, those occurrences are phenomenal. But here it is. They appear to be in the nature of a huge emotional displacement and rearrangement. That's the first thing I'm going to look for. When having an experience. Has this happened to me? Have I had this huge emotional displacement rearrangement? Ideas, emotions, and attitude, which were once the guiding force of the lives of these men, are suddenly, and that means like right now, have been cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. And that's what that should look like. Man, that's a very beautiful thing to experience. And many of us on this call today have done that. I know, because I know many of you that are here. And I thank you for coming out, listening to me share about it, because you already know. So back over to page 90 where we were at. There again, if he says yes, his attention should be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. You should be described to him as one of a fellowship who, as part of their own recovery, try to help others, and who will be glad to talk to him if he cares to see you. So if you would, hold with me right there. Let's run back over here and let's go to page Roman numeral 16. And that's going to be in the forward to the second edition. And I want to drop down to the last paragraph, and this kind of connects exactly to what we were talking about. The physician, now we're talking about Dr. Bob when Dr. Bob met Bill. This is their first meeting. This is the first time they met right here. This physician had repeatedly tried spiritual readings to resolve his alcoholic dilemma, but it failed. Think about that for you and me in our own history, in our sexaholic addiction, in our alcoholic, whatever it is. Did we try spiritual means to resolve that dilemma, but failed many times over? I don't know about you, but I was prayed over. I was dunked a few times in baptism. I was this, I was that. I've done all that stuff. And just like this man here, it failed. And look at what he says when the broker, talking about Bill, gave him Dr. Silkworth's description of alcoholism and hopelessness. Then Dr. Bob began to pursue a spiritual remedy for his malady with a willingness he'd never before been able to muster. He sobered, never to drink again up to the moment of his death in 1950. But here it is. This seemed to prove that one alcoholic, one sexaholic could affect another as no non-alcoholic or sexaholic could. But here it is right here. It also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. Now, I'm looking to permanently recover here. I don't know about you, but I know about me. And I'm not here just to be sober. I'm here to permanently recover. So in order for me to do that, it tells me right there, strenuous work, one with another, is going to be vital. And it tells me back over here where we left off that that is definitely going to be the case. So bottom paragraph, page 90. If he does not want to see you, never force yourself upon him. Neither should the family hysterically plead with him to do anything, nor should they tell him much about you. They should wait for the end of his next drinking bout. You might place the book where he can see it in the interval. Here, no specific rule can be given. The family must decide these things, but urge them not to be over anxious, because that might spoil matters. Why? Because people like you and me relapse over and over and over and over. And sometimes, we don't mean to do that. We just do that because that's who we are. But usually the family should not try to tell you story. I've said in many meetings, and I love it when the spouse will begin to try to tell the man's story, and the chairman very gently will say, that's well and good, but we'd rather hear that from him, not you. And I think it's important that we do that. When possible, avoid meeting the man through his family, and I always try to do that. Approach through a doctor or an institution is a better bet. If your man needs hospitalization, he should have it, but not forcibly unless he is violent. Let the doctor, if he will, tell him that he has something in the way of a solution. And for me today, we know what the solution is. We know what the problem is. We know what the solution is. And thank God we have a program of action to stay in that solution. So when your man is better, the doctor might suggest a visit from you. Though you have talked with the family, leave them out of the first discussion. Now, these are some directions, and this applies a whole lot to AA. I don't know so much about SA. I haven't been on a whole lot of 12-step calls yet. Under these conditions, your prospect, and see, that's what he is at this point. He's a prospect. And we'll see he's under no pressure. That's definitely how I want anyone to feel. I don't know about you, but I know about me. And whenever I feel like I'm under pressure, I'm going to attack. In fact, I've done some very dangerous behavior at times when I've felt under pressure. So I don't ever want to do that. I don't want anybody doing that to me, and I don't want to do that to anybody as well. He will feel he can deal with you without being nagged by his family. Man, that's a beautiful thing. I know it was for me. There were just some people that I really needed to talk to without my family being there. One of them hosting this meeting today. At certain times in my sobriety, I've had to do that. After a while, turn the talk to some phase of drinking or acting out. Tell him enough about your habits, which whatever those are, symptoms and experiences. And I think we're going to have to know what those are before we can do that. And for me, working the steps with the sponsor absolutely opened that up for me to see exactly what that was to be able to share with somebody else. Encourage him to speak of himself. If he wishes to talk, let him do so. He will thus get a better idea of how you ought to proceed. But here's a direction that I've had to learn. If he's not communicative, give him a sketch of your drinking or your acting out career up to the time you quit, but say nothing for the moment of how that was accomplished. If he's in a serious mood, dwell on his trouble that liquor or acting out has caused him. Being careful not to moralize or lecture. Man, I hate it when people would do that to me. If his mood is light, tell him some humorous stories of your escapades, not his, yours. But then try to get him to tell some of his. But here's the deal. When he sees, not when he hears, but when he sees that you know all about drinking and acting out, we're not even talking about recovery at this point, commence to describe yourself as an alcoholic or a sexaholic. Tell him how baffled you were. Man, what a promise. Remember how it was when we came in here? Some of us have been in the program, the other fellowship, for many, many years and come in here seriously baffled. I had given these book studies. I had worked these steps. I don't know how many different times. I'd done all this stuff, but lust is more powerful than I am. And it had me absolutely baffled when I came here. For a period of time, I couldn't hardly even share in a meeting. I felt so broken. Somebody had asked me to share on the book one time, and I just really couldn't do it. And I began to think, my God, I was given this gift, and now it's been taken away. And, hell, it's all about me at this point. But none of that was true. The deal was, I'm baffled. I'm confused. I don't know what's got a hold of me here until I really start taking a look at lust, because I'm 25 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous at this time, and I'm dying. I'm dying in those rooms from this, and I can't figure out why. Nobody ever said to me, David, maybe your problem is outside of this fellowship. But the last man that I went through this work with, we finished the fourth step. We sat down for hours and hours and hours and did a fifth step. And after he heard that fifth step, he looked at me and he said, I believe your solution is outside of the fellowship of AA. No one had ever said that to me in my life, ever. And I said, I don't understand. He said, I think that there's people that can help you, but I don't think it's in our rooms. And that began a journey for me. Of course, I still had to run off a little more, but that began a journey for me that has been very beautiful. And I'm definitely glad I got to be a part of it. So I want to give him an account of the struggles that I made to stop. That's going to be a long story if you talk to me. and some of you too, I know I've talked to you. Show him the mental twist, which leads to the first drink. Now there's a hell of a direction. Show him that. Show him in this book that. Take him to that part in chapter 3 of the insanity of the man of 30, Jim, the jaywalker, and Fred's story. And although all those guys were different, all those guys were the same because of the insanity. Just because you and I are different in different areas of our lives, we come from different nationalities, different faiths, it doesn't matter. You and I have one thing in common. We're lustaholics. We suggest you do this as we have done it in the chapter on alcoholism. Remember chapter 3. Go back and look at that real closely, because right here it's asking you to do the same thing with him as that chapter did with us, as our sponsors did with us. And here it is. If he is an alcoholic or he is a lustaholic, he will understand you at once. We call it language of the heart. We know each other. He will match your mental inconsistencies with some of his own. Well, if you're satisfied that he is a real alcoholic or a lustaholic, Begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. Step 1. I'm going to rain down on step 1 right here. You can ask the guys that are on the call that I sponsor today. I'm going to rain down on step 1 right in here. Show him. I'm not going to tell him, but I'm going to show him from my experience the queer mental condition that surrounds that first drink, prevents normal functioning of the willpower. And I'm going to do that right there in chapter 3. And we're going to pound that to death. Don't, at this stage, refer to the book unless he has seen it. Most of the people that I work with today has already seen it and wishes to discuss it. Be careful not to brand him as an alcoholic. I don't ever do that. I'll let them do it themselves. Let him draw his own conclusion. Remember Fred's story in chapter 3. That's exactly what they done with him. If he sticks to the idea that he can still control his lust and acting out, drinking, whatever it is, then perhaps he still has a choice. Most of us lost that choice. Remember on page 24, hold with me right here. We'll go to page 24. We'll come back and finish up. On page 24 of the book, it says this. Let's look at they say whenever you see the squiggly writing in this book, it's good to pay very close attention to it. My mentor, Charlie P., used to tell me this all the time. The fact is that most alcoholics, most sexaholics, most lustaholics, not all, but most, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice. Now, I don't ever read in any of the literature, and I've read a lot of it, where we ever get that choice back. Not the power to choose whether we will act out again or not. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We're unable at certain times to bring in with consciousness, with the sufficient force, the memory, suffering, and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We're without defense against that first drink or acting out, whatever the case may be. So back to page 92, and I'll finish up right here. If he sticks to the idea that he can still control it, tell him that he possibly can if he's not too alcoholic or sexaholic. But insist that if he's severely afflicted, step 1, there may be little chance of him recovering by himself. I believe there, if I'm not mistaken, it was back on Roman numeral 28. I'm sorry. The sense and the ease and the comfort which comes by taking a few drinks or a few times of acting out. He's going to talk about the desire again, the craving will develop. And as you read down toward the last 2 or 3 sentences of that paragraph, it says this is repeated over and over. And unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. So for us to lead him through the first 6 chapters of the book, to help him to have the experience that we've had, man, that's an experience that we must not miss. I'm really grateful to have been here today with you guys. Thank you guys for coming out and being a part of this. The next few weeks, we will finish up working with others, and that's usually as far as I've ever went with the book study. The rest of it would basically just be reading to each other, and we can do that anytime. But the program of recovery, there again, it's this past weekend I got to celebrate 16 years of marriage. I'm so grateful for that. I never would have done that had I not come to you folks, and you showed me exactly how to recover from this hopeless state of mind. I'm grateful for the recovery I had that I brought here with me when I came. Those 25 years in the NAA were not in vain. I learned a whole lot about recovery during those years. I've worked the steps as many times in as many ways as anybody that I know. But I do know today that I am free from lust for the first time in my life for close to 17 months now. And today, life takes on a new meaning, just like it says it will. Just like we read right there in the very beginning, back over on page 89. You know, life will take on new meaning, and to see a fellowship grow up about you. And I'm seeing that today. I see that with all of you. I see it with the guys that I sponsor. I'm starting to see it with the guys they sponsor. And this fellowship is growing up about us. It's nothing I've done but become willing to surrender and to work these steps, have an experience, and help my brother. Steps 1, 2, 3 helped me to get right with God. Steps 4 through 7 helped me to get right with David. Steps 8 and 9 helped me to get right with you. Step 10 helps me to stay right with David. Step 11 helps me to stay right with God. Step 12 helps me to stay right with you. Thank you for letting me share. Glad to be here.